Hey, algebra students. We are done with Unit 0, talking about statistics and analyzing data, and now we'll get started in Yen. So this would be hopefully a lot of review from what you learned in pre-algebra. You can see as we look through here, we're going to be working with expressions, writing some equations and functions. So this would be a lot of the foundational work that we do for the rest of the year, algebra. So here in lesson 1, we're going to be talking about evaluating expressions with one or more variables and also how to evaluate powers. Okay, let's see. We'll start out with a little vocabulary, talking about variables. Of course, everybody knows variables are letters. They're n, whatever we have represents either a specific number if it's an equation, or it could represent any number if it's an equation. We'll talk about those here in just a second. There are some letters that are more used than others. So x and y are usually used together. N is a pretty common variable. You can really use whatever you want, but some to stay away from. E is actually not a variable. Later on, when we do some work with exponents, we'll know that e is approximately 2.71. It's a number that goes on for infinity. It's a irrational number, and also symbols that we think of. Just symbols. Pi is not a letter, but it is a symbol, and of course it doesn't represent anything. It represents one specific number, and that's 3.14. Okay, so there are some things that we can represent with letters, some we cannot. All right, an expression has no equal sign is ultimately what I want you to remember here. So an expression, 3x squared plus 4x. This would be an expression. You can have as many variables in there as you want. This one just has the one, but this is an expression has an equal sign. Okay, and so it could look very similar. We'd say 3x squared plus 4x, but as soon as we put an equal sign over there, equals 5, now it is an equation. And here is one important distinction that you need to know this year. We evaluate expressions. We will we plug in a given value for the variable, and then simplify. So an example would be, say, we say, all right, x equals 5. Well, that means that we're going to plug in 5 wherever we see the x in here, and then we're going to simplify as much as we can until we just have maybe one number at the end. Okay, an equation, you can see that wouldn't work. If I plug in 5 here, well, it may or may not equal 5, and that's why we don't evaluate equations, we actually solve equations to determine which one value for x makes this equal to 5. And some more than one value, but that's solve equations. We evaluate or simplify expressions. All right, so we're going to have some real cut and dry, simple examples here. First one here, we're going to say when t equals 4. Okay? So one thing that I want you to keep in mind is when you're evaluating, when you're plugging in these numbers, it's important that you put a set of parentheses. And so we'll say, okay, well, if t equals 4, plug that in. 4 plus 7 is 11. And make sure you put a box around your answer. Obviously, with these little ones, it's pretty easy to see your answer, but when you start doing 4, 5, 6 steps, it winds up being more difficult to see your answer. All right, let's see here. We're going to say 4, plug that in for t. We've got 20. Make sure that you always reduce fractions. Philosophy is if it's simple to reduce, then reduce it. If it's a pretty complicated fraction, we've probably turned it into if it's not real obvious that you can reduce it, I'm not so picky. But this one clearly is an easy one to reduce. I can divide both of these by 4, and I get 1/5. Right? Let's see here, 31 minus 4. Again, I'm putting parentheses every time I enter it. That would be 27. And then here I have 12 times 4. Okay? So you can see that if I just the 4 in here without the set of parentheses, it'd look kind of like 124. And so don't do that. Just in case you didn't know, if you forgot from pre-algebra, if there is no symbol in between a number and a letter, it is implied that it is multiplication. So here I have 48. Okay, takes care of I can statement number 1, evaluating expressions. And here we are evaluating powers or exponents. And so a couple things to know. We say this is 3 to the 4th. So that's how we would say it. Sometimes we'll cubed if it's to the 3rd power, or squared if it's to the 2nd power. So those are also phrases that you should be comfortable with. 3 to the 4th power, essentially what this means is it's like saying 3 4 times. So 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which would be, let's see, this would be 9, this would be 9, 9 times 9 is 81. So 3 to the 4th power is 81. If you have fractions, that is also, sometimes that can be a big deal, but if you know how to do it, it's not any more difficult. We have 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. If you know how to multiply fractions, you just multiply the tops together. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. So another way you can think of it is you could just cube the top and then cube the bottom, because 1 cubed is 1 and 3 cubed is 27. Let's see, and lastly, if you have a negative number, be careful, because negative 5 squared is different than negative 5 squared. If you do this one on your calculator, you'll notice that you get negative 25. That's because your calculator is doing the order of operations. It does the exponents first, and then it essentially treats this like it's negative 1 times 5 squared. And so then it multiplies by negative 1. Okay, which is clearly not what we want. What we want is negative 5 times negative 5, which we know a negative times a negative is a positive, so we want positive 25. Okay, that takes care of lesson 1.